Hello and welcome again to Bruno Latour in 12 Easy Pieces. Yeah. Um, Without a doubt, we have never been modern. That was first published in French in 1991. Is my best known book. Unlike my studies on the Salk Institute and the pasteurization of France, this book is not an empirical study. It is neither sociological nor historical, and unlike Science in Action, it is not a textbook for science and technology studies. It is a philosophical text of speculative and I'm very afraid of this quite Gallic character. With respect to the discussions about postmodernism that were peaking at the time, I wanted to offer a real counterpoint. I questioned the existence of modernity.
That sold pretty well.
I claimed that we still live in a kind of pre-modernity. Now, the starting point for the book was a long review that I had written of a book by two science historians who were friends of mine in 1985, Stephen Shapin and Simon Schaffer, published a groundbreaking study on the beginnings of modern science. Shapin and Schaffer investigated the debates between the natural philosopher and chemist Robert Boyle and the philosopher and political theorist Thomas Hobbes. Boyle, you probably know, is well known for his experiments on the properties of air, in which he used a vacuum pump. And Hobbes is rather famous for his theory of the Leviathan, the sovereign ruler over humans who, without him, would fight each other like wolves. Hence the title of the book, Leviathan and the Air Pump, Hobbes, Boyle, and the Experimental Life. When it came out in the mid-1980s, the book was a huge success. Although Shapin and Schaffer were primarily interested in the question of why experiments are conducted in the first place in order to arrive at scientific truth, I read their study somewhat differently, namely as a major reflection concerning the problem of modernity. In fact, that was what I took away from the discussions between Hobbes and Boyle, that since that time, since the 17th century, there have been two separate domains, politics on the one hand and science on the other, society on the one hand and nature on the other, and human actors on the one hand and non-human actors on the other. And it is precisely from these divisions that modernity derives its tremendous productivity and dynamism. Now, if you look more closely, there are of course all kinds of connections, transitions, and hybridizations between these fields. This is demonstrated by Pasteur's bacteria in the 19th century, as well as the ozone depletion as observed in the late 20th century. But this is also illustrated by the debates between Hobbes and Boyle, and in this respect, we've never been really modern. There have always been hybrid ensembles networks of human and non-human actors that shape our present. I've spoken about these networks and also about the supposedly modern separation between human and non-human actors before, especially in the Pasteur book. In this connection, I initially focused on semiotics, especially the linguistics of Algirdas Greimas. Thus, in the Pasteur book, I explained, for example, I use actor, agent, or actant without making any assumptions about who they may be and what properties they are endowed with. Much more general than character or dramatis personae, they have the key feature of being autonomous figures. Apart from this, they can be anything, an individual, for example, Peter, a collective, for example, the crowd, figurative, so anthropomorphic or zoomorphic, or non-figurative, such, for example, as, fate. Now, to complicate things a little, one can also say that with Greimas, the actants can be represented by different actors. The villain actant, for example, can be a lion or it can be a stepmother. And to complicate things even further, with Greimas, every single sentence of a text can be seen as a kind of stage for various actants and their respective actors. Language itself appears here as a kind of theater. As a matter of fact, the discourse about non-human actors does not only have a linguistic background, but transports also a history closely linked to theater. Perhaps this history dates back to antiquity, but it experienced a real boom in the modern times. For example, with Edward Gordon Craig, who in 1908 suggested replacing human actors on stage with what he called a Uber-marionette, or with Oscar Schlemmer in the 1920s, who, instead of human actors, wanted to send constructions with built-in gramophones on the experimental stage of the Bauhaus theater. Ultimately, every puppet is a non-human actor.
In that respect, however, you yourself would be an argument against your own thesis. Perhaps modernity consists precisely in combining the non-human with the human, not only secretly or even unconsciously, but quite explicitly and purposefully. In any case, for the theater makers you mentioned, Craig and Schlemmer, it was extremely modern to send non-human actors onto the stage, and we are both very modern too. We always have been.
I'm not so sure about that, but never mind. That was the sixth easy piece. Thanks for watching and looking forward to seeing you again soon.